Chicago had Capone. New York had Lucky Luciano. But in the mid-50s Florida, the international gateway to the Caribbean is ruled by Santo Trafficante, a mob boss turning neighboring Cuba into a gambling paradise.
He was very powerful. He was the go-to guy when it came to Cuba.
He was a mafia don who was smart enough to avoid the limelight.
On the verge of becoming the wealthiest mob boss of them all, he is betrayed by one head of state, then another. Hell-bent on revenge, we know he tried to kill one. But did he succeed in killing the second? Was Santo Trafficante behind the terrible assassination that shocked the United States?
Nothing's more sensational than the assassination of the president.
This is the story of Florida's top don, Santo Trafficante. November the 22nd, 1963, Dallas, Texas. President Kennedy and his wife are heading for a lunch with civic leaders.
The motorcade begins the 11-mile ride to the Dallas Trade Mart, where the president is to deliver a major address.
The president's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the Trade Mart.
The president is hit by 3 bullets in quick succession.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Several police officers are rushing up the hill at this time.
The Dallas police almost immediately identified Lee Harvey Oswald.
They quickly put together a description of Lee Harvey Oswald as a lone nut who may have had communist sympathies and was involved in pro-Castro Cuban operations.
Within 2 hours, the pro-Cuban revolutionary is arrested. Case seemingly closed. 2 days later, Oswald is being transferred to the county jail.
You shoot the president?
I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
A man steps out of the crowd. The gunman is another man with strong links to Cuba, Jack Ruby. One year later, the Warren Report concludes that Oswald acted alone, and his motives were political. Oswald's killer, Jack Ruby, also acted alone.
Just a disgruntled American saddened by Kennedy's death who wanted to take revenge against the accused shooter.
But from the moment it is published, the rushed report comes under intense criticism.
The report was built around the evidence most favorable to that conclusion.
Kennedy's successor, the new president, Johnson, does not want the investigation to drag on.
It was coming up on the re-election, and President Johnson simply did not want the question of what happened to President Kennedy as an issue.
It was obvious to many people it had been done very flimsily. It wasn't a really solid report. There are many questions.
For over a decade, the idea that Oswald was acting alone just didn't sit well. The press report on rumors that Oswald was working for the CIA, that he was working for the Cuban revolutionary leader Fidel Castro, or even the mob. 12 years after the Warren Report, a House Select Committee is formed in another attempt to get to the truth. In September 1978, the committee call a powerful and ruthless mafioso. He was the head of the Florida Mafia and one-time king of Cuba's casinos.
For the record, Will the witness please state his full name?
Santo Trafficante.
Mr. Trafficante, I want to ask you a question that is very important to this committee, and that is, did you have any foreknowledge of the assassination of President Kennedy?
Someone believes that Santo Trafficante knows more about the death of John F. Kennedy than he should. That man is Chief Counsel to the House Select Committee, Robert Blakey. At the very moment the news of the assassination breaks, Blakey is working as a prosecutor in the State Department.
I myself was in the office with Robert Kennedy, the president's brother. All of a sudden, the news of the assassination came out. That somebody would shoot at an American president is unbelievable.
When attorney Blakey first hears the rumors of mob involvement, he doesn't think there is anything in them.
I thought they didn't do it. The killing of Kennedy was not with a machine gun and guys dressed in black.
But when Blakey drafts the famous RICO laws that will eventually put the heads of 5 major crime families behind bars, he goes on a steep learning curve and discovers that the Mafia are now a much more sophisticated outfit.
Until the RICO law was passed, mob bosses were virtually immune from prosecution. They never pulled a trigger, they never beat anybody up. The RICO law was able to get them because they were now part of an enterprise.
Now Blakey sets his sights on Trafficante, the one-time Cuban casino king. The first alarm bell is triggered by the death of Oswald.
The killing of Oswald on the way to the jail has all the earmarks of an assassination of the assassin.
Not only is Oswald's murder typical of a mob hit, the man who killed Oswald, Jack Ruby, runs a nightclub used by gangsters linked to a New Orleans mob boss, Carlos Marcello. And Marcello is Trafficante's closest mob ally.
While he's not a member of the Mafia, there are connections for organized crime, and to the Mafia in particular.
And there are other threads in the report that Blakey feels need pulling.
It turned out that it was not as hard-clad as it might be in a conclusion.
The original Warren report glossed over other connections between Oswald and the same Carlos Marcello. Lee Harvey Oswald's uncle and surrogate father is none other than Carlos Marcello's bookmaker. And both Oswald and Ruby have direct connections to Cuba. And somewhere in the middle of this web of intrigue sits the one-time Cuban racketeer, Santo Trafficante.
If you take his connections and trace them out like a concentric circle, it looks like organized crime in some sense were responsible.
So who is this elusive Santo Trafficante?
What is your current occupation?
I'm retired.
This is far from the truth.
By the late 1970s, Trafficante was still considered the boss of the Tampa Mafia and still an influential figure not only in the mob scene in Florida, but nationally.
He had these piercing eyes that could look right through your soul. He could be a ruthless killer. He could turn on you instantly and whack someone and no problem at all.
In 1954, Santo Trafficante inherits the Florida mob from his father.
It's pretty unusual for mafia bosses to hand control over to the sons.
Trafficante Sr. is notorious for eliminating enemies, regardless of profile or reputation. A few years earlier, he was being challenged for supremacy by a gangster called Jimmy Lumia. Trafficante Sr. taught his son what a Trafficante does with those who show no respect. Lumia was a well-known figure in Florida, a close friend of the mayor. Nonetheless, Trafficante Sr. sanctioned the hit. It's a valuable lesson to Trafficante Jr. No matter how high a profile, if someone crosses you, you hit them. Though ruthless, the group Trafficante inherits is little more than a small-time gambling outfit in Tampa. But the young mobster sees an opportunity to expand his operation. A potential gold mine sitting just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. In the early 50s, the Caribbean island of Cuba is run by a brutal and corrupt ex-general called Fulgencio Batista, and Batista throws the doors open to the Mafia. Operating completely free of American regulations, mobsters invest heavily in casinos and hotels where they have no trouble with the authorities.
The appeal of Cuba was that it a very corruptible government at that time.
It was a deal with the dictator. They kicked back every night 10% of the earnings from these casinos. It was a tropical paradise.
Could you tell us when you moved to Cuba?
Around 1953 or 1954. I was in the gambling business and the nightclub casino business, which were legal at that time in Cuba.
Trafficante becomes the facilitator for other crime families to move in. Tampa has strong community ties with Cuba, and he is one of the only mobsters to speak the same language.
Trafficante and the Tampa guys, they spoke Spanish, which a lot of the New York and mobsters who were operating in Cuba didn't.
Trafficante had the establishment, the connections, he knew the people. It was all set there.
Would you say that collectively, your investment could have been over $1 million?
No.
In fact, Trafficante earns a fortune from his multiple casinos and nightclubs.
He had interest in 5 casinos. He raked in millions all the time.
And it was a booming place for the Mafia.
As profitable as the casinos are, they are nothing compared to a new and lucrative market: drugs. Back in the days of Prohibition, most liquor found its way into the United States through Canada. It made the mobs of New York and Chicago very wealthy. Now, drugs are the new commodity, and Cuba the major gateway, right in Trafficante's backyard. Illegal drugs are set to make Trafficante one of the wealthiest dons in the U.S.
Even if you got the northern mobsters coming down, they were second bananas to the Trafficante family in Cuba.
Within just a few years, Trafficante is making millions importing drugs through Cuba and cleaning the profits through a chain of casinos.
Santo Trafficante was really the major domo and the major figure in gambling in Havana.
But when a young revolutionary communist called Fidel Castro threatens to overthrow General Batista, it puts Trafficante's expanding empire in jeopardy. The House Select Committee on Assassinations is reinvestigating the death of John F. Kennedy. They're exploring possible links between his assassin, Castro sympathizer Lee Harvey Oswald, Oswald's killer, Jack Ruby, and Santo Trafficante, the mob boss of Florida. Back in 1958, Trafficante is making a fortune through his many Cuban casinos. The growing drugs trade is about to set him up for life when revolutionary communist Fidel Castro threatens to derail the gravy train.
Can you tell us, in late 1958, what was the result of the activities of Castro?
Wasn't too good. Every other day they had bombs and stuff like that.
Trafficante cares little for politics, but a lot about profits. So the mob boss moves fast, and like any smart gambler, he covers all the angles.
In the years before the revolution, Castro had come to Tampa, Ybor City, a number of times to do fundraising and speaking events. When he came to town, he would meet with the Trafficantes as well.
In exchange for money, Trafficante secures a deal with the rebel. Even if Castro's revolution succeeds, he has guarantees that it will be business as usual for the mob in Cuba.
Trafficante definitely was hedging his bets. He was paying off the Batista officials and the government, but at the same time, he was giving money to the guerrillas and to Castro.
But by 1958, as the violence escalates, Castro's guerrillas hit profits. Gamblers start deserting the casinos. Other bosses fold and quit Cuba, but Trafficante holds his nerve.
While every other mob figure bolted back to the U.S., he stayed put. He felt secure.
All his buddies, everyone was pulling out. Trafficante felt that he could schmooze his way back in and keep what he had going there.
Whoever wins, Batista or Castro, the Florida mob boss Santo Trafficante believes his empire is safe.
Trafficante had always thought, look, you just buy your way out of anything down here.
On January the 1st, 1959, Castro finally takes control as General Batista flees Cuba. It's only then that the king of Cuba's casinos discovers that he has seriously miscalculated.
He thought he knew the territory. He was wrong.
Castro was a little different fella.
Little did he know that Fidel Castro didn't support anything that they were doing.
Trafficante has been double-crossed.
He waited too long to get out of Cuba.
I got news that the Cuban officials were looking for to put me in jail because one of the things I was a Batista collaborator. They raided my apartment. They were looking for money. They tore up the furniture. They had weapons. I knew that sooner or later I would have to get out of there.
Trafficante soon finds it's not just his criminal empire that's in danger. His life hangs by a thread.
Castro actually jails Trafficante in Triscornia Detention Center.
With men disappearing from the cells around him, Trafficante knows the deal.
You could hear the execution firing squads taking care of Castro's enemies.
They were going to execute him. That's how close it came for him not making it out of Cuba.
Trafficante has to get out, and fast. He reaches out to his long-term ally, New Orleans mob boss, Carlos Marcello.
Mr. Trafficante, do you know Carlos Marcello?
Yes, sir, I know Carlos Marcello, about 30 years.
Mysteriously, around the time Trafficante is in jail, Carlos Marcello's bagman, Jack Ruby, makes frequent trips to Cuba.
We know that Jack Ruby made quick trips from Cuba to Miami and back that have no explanation if he was just a tourist.
Could Ruby have been trying to get Trafficante out of jail? The next question gets to the heart of the conspiracy investigation.
Mr. Trafficante, did you ever know a Jack Ruby?
No, sir, I never remember meeting Jack Ruby.
Never remember meeting him?
No.
It seems that Trafficante understands the danger of linking himself to Jack Ruby, the man who shot Lee Harvey Oswald.
Trafficante denied it, and denied that he knew Jack Ruby. But there's every reason to disbelieve Trafficante on it.
The committee is desperately trying to join the dots.
Ruby had been connected to Carlos Marcello. He had been running money, mainly for Carlos Marcello out of Cuba.
2 months after his arrest by Castro, in August 1959, Trafficante is unexpectedly released from jail. Could Ruby have been paying someone off?
He shouldn't have gotten out, period. End of story.
There's little doubt that he got out the very simple way. He bribed his way.
This time, Trafficante doesn't gamble. He leaves Cuba. He's lost everything.
I can see that I had to leave there. There was nothing there for me. Everybody was being arrested and nobody was safe. So I made out I was coming to the States for just a visit, and I never went back.
He was devastated. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
He had multiple millions invested either by himself or through other members of the mob. These were hard dollars, multi-million.
He had more casinos than anybody else. From his point of view, the Cuban Revolution was a disaster.
The gambling empire Trafficante helped to build in Cuba now shifts west to Bugsy Siegel's Las Vegas. Even worse, mob bosses across the United States who had invested in Trafficante's Cuban island haven now want their money back. Trafficante's seat at the Mafia top table has been taken from him. And there is only one man to blame for his downfall.
Santo never forgave Castro. One of his biggest aims in life was getting back to Cuba and getting rid of Castro. He would have done anything he could possibly to do it.
But Trafficante isn't the only one with a grudge against Castro.
In Key West, Florida, anti-communist feeling mounts. Fidel Castro is hanged in effigy. Anti-Castro forces are beginning to join hands in other cities.
Santo Trafficante cultivates ties with the anti-Castro exile movement in Florida and surrounds himself with a mob of Cuban gangsters. His involvement doesn't go unnoticed. Trafficante soon discovers that he is aligned with some very powerful allies. September 1960. Trafficante is approached by a messenger sent by the boss of Chicago, Sam Giancana. Giancana wants Trafficante to carry out one of the most high-profile hits in mob history, to kill Castro. But Giancana isn't authorizing the hit. In fact, the contract doesn't come from the Mafia at all. The House Select Committee on Assassinations is investigating conspiracy theories linked to the killing of President John F. Kennedy. They're examining Florida mob boss Santo Trafficante and his links to anti-Castro activities. He has revealed that after losing millions in Castro's Cuban Revolution, he's been offered revenge by killing the communist leader.
Mr. Trafficante, can you tell us who was the person who first contacted you?
John Rosselli.
John Rosselli is Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana's right-hand man.
Could you tell us the substance of the conversation you had with him?
Well, he told me that the CIA and the United States government wanted this thing done. That is what he said to me.
In the history of organized crime, the lines between the mob and law enforcement are often blurred. But Trafficante's revelation breaks new ground. The American government were asking mob boss Sam Giancana to help assassinate the revolutionary leader of Cuba.
The CIA were desperate to get rid of Castro. He was a persona non grata.
But the CIA is too smart to carry out the assassination itself.
When the U.S. government was looking for somebody to assassinate Castro, they said, well, who are good assassins? They said, the Mafia.
It just shows you the respect that law enforcement had for the Mafia. They could get things done in a way that law enforcement or legitimate operations could not.
The real scandal is the assumption on the part of the CIA that the Mafia was a group of hired killers.
Now the CIA approached Giancana and asked him to find a hitman. Giancana knows when it comes to Cuba, there is only one man with the connections, the king of Cuban casinos, Santo Trafficante.
That was just the kind of man the CIA was looking for, a man that belonged to an organization that was skilled in murder and plots and was very unhappy, had lost a lot of money, and would do anything to get back there.
In September 1960, a meeting is arranged at the Fontainebleau Hotel, Miami, between the CIA, Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana, and his chosen hitman, Florida mob boss Santo Trafficante. The CIA and the mob are now at the same table with a single sinister aim, an attempt on a world leader's life.
What was your reaction to killing President Castro?
Well, at the time, I think it was a good thing, because he had established a communistic base 90 miles from the United States. And being that the United States government wanted this thing done, I go along with it. Same as a war. I figure it was like a war.
Trafficante was helping out the CIA because anything that worked to get rid of Castro would be a benefit to him.
The agency first suggests a classic mobster hit in which Castro would die in a hail of bullets.
The government idea was you just send your assassins in and they shoot the fella down.
There is something funny about the CIA trying to tell the mob how to kill someone.
Giancana and Trafficante propose a more subtle approach.
Giancana and Trafficante, they said, you've got to do this in a clever way. That's when all these poisoning plots were considered.
Was there discussion about poison pills?
There was a discussion about pills, yes, sir. I'm telling you, any kind of a way that was possible to get rid of him.
And Trafficante knows an official who can get close to Castro.
Trafficante could get Castro to some restaurant where they would slip poison pills into his food.
A plan is agreed, and the CIA officers hand over $150,000 in cash. A line has been crossed. The CIA has just paid the mob to kill Castro.
Trafficante knew it was crazy, but he wasn't stupid enough to pass up $150,000. That was tax-free.
But the money and getting revenge on Castro is only part of the deal. In exchange, law enforcement agencies will turn a blind eye to mafia operations.
He was told that if he did this little job for the government, he was home free. Nobody would bother him anymore.
But the plot is soon forgotten as the move against Castro goes to another level. Behind the scenes, Giancana has been helping a charismatic young senator named John F. Kennedy to become president of the United States.
Old man Kennedy, Joe, sent Frank Sinatra, to talk to Giancana. He said, if you carry Illinois for us, there'll be no bothering you. The Kennedys won't go after you.
Joe Kennedy knows that Giancana practically owns this swing state. If anyone can rig votes in Illinois, it's Giancana.
From the mob's point of view, it was a no-lose situation.
And the mob holds up the first part of the deal. They help get John F. Kennedy elected.
Was there mob money in the election in Chicago? Yes. Period. End of story.
Now, with the president apparently on side, Trafficante discovers that the new administration is making Cuba a priority. The CIA are asked to ramp up their plans from an assassination to a full-scale invasion. As a man who has invested heavily in the Cuban exile movement in Florida, Trafficante believes his men will at last get the support they need. On April 16th, 1961, Kennedy sends 1,500 mercenaries, financed by the CIA, to invade Cuba's Bay of Pigs. Among the fighters are some of Trafficante's very own Florida allies, the Cuban exile movement. The plan is that Kennedy's planes are on standby, ready to back the ground forces. The assault is to be a swift surprise attack. But the invaders are outnumbered 10-1. As Castro's forces fight back, Kennedy fails to send American air support. In just 3 days, Castro crushes the American invasion. It is a complete failure.
Well, the CIA plan for the invasion didn't work very well. It was an amateurish campaign that 1,500 or so men could overthrow all of Castro's troops.
Castro is now a national hero, and Traficante's hope to revive his Cuban empire crumbles. The men he has funded are now dead or in prison. Trafficante has been double-crossed again, first by Castro in Cuba, and now by Kennedy's lack of conviction.
Santo Trafficante only had one culprit, and that was President Kennedy. And he blamed Kennedy more than anybody else for the failure of Bay of Pigs.
And things are about to get a lot worse for the Mafia. Giancana had helped Kennedy to get elected, but far from ignoring mob activities, the new president sends his brother, Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, to go after organized crime.
There are a number of different areas where action is needed. I think that in the field of organized crime, I think it's a very serious situation that's facing the country at the present time.
Giancana felt more betrayed.
The fact that he came up with money and helped JFK win went by the board.
Bobby Kennedy, by going after the Mafia, incited Trafficante into more hatred.
After first siding with the mob, the American government is now going after them. And no one crosses Trafficante, not even the President of the United States. President Kennedy's failure to topple Fidel Castro has ruined Florida mob boss Santo Traficante's fortune and crushed his dreams of reviving his Cuban casino empire. To make matters worse, despite the mob successfully rigging elections to help Kennedy win the White House, the government is launching a crusade against organized crime. Twice, Trafficante has been betrayed by Kennedy, and now seeks payback. But the mob in the north is under heavy surveillance, and Trafficante's mob ally, Sam Giancana, is effectively under lockdown.
Giancana was under such intense surveillance that carloads of FBI agents would follow right on his back bumper. Everywhere he went, they went. There was an all-out campaign against Giancana, which made him very angry.
It is impossible for Giancana to have meetings, and completely disrupts the Chicago outfit. Other mob bosses are angry and resentful.
There was no question about the animosity that mob dons had for John F. Kennedy and for Bobby Kennedy.
The conversations about Kennedy were really very vicious.
There were numerous bugs picked up by the FBI. One of them particularly was from Sam Giancana, who said, "We broke our balls trying to get him elected, and look what he does against us, that son of a bitch."
But Trafficante is shrewd and keeps off the phone lines.
He was a Mafia don who was smart enough to avoid the limelight. He was never caught on a bug or on a wire, never implicated himself in any crime.
In Chicago, Giancana may be under 24-hour scrutiny, but in the South, Trafficante and Marcello certainly have freedom to plan the mob's revenge on the Kennedys. But did they? The committee had already tried to get to the bottom of mob connections to the assassination of Kennedy. 15 years earlier, in 1975, they called Sam Giancana to testify. But Giancana never makes it to the stand. The night before, he is shot dead. Then, in 1976, they call Giancana's right-hand man, John Rosselli. His first testimony is explosive, and the committee recall him for further questioning. But Rosselli mysteriously disappears. 5 days later, his dismembered body is found inside an oil drum floating in Dumbfounding Bay, Miami.
The three major mafia players the CIA attempt to kill Castro, Rosselli, Sam Giancana, and Santo Trafficante Jr. And the only one who survived was Santo. The way they were cut up and the way they were shot in their mouths. They were killed in a way that indicated they had been squealers.
Trafficante is the last man standing. But when Blakey looks at the evidence for his connection to Kennedy's assassination, Trafficante was nowhere near Dallas on that November day in 1963. He was with his lawyer in his hometown of Tampa, Florida. November 22nd, 1963, Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald fires 3 bullets in quick succession. Oswald is a known communist with pro-Castro connections and a grudge against Kennedy. But his uncle and father figure also works for Santo Trafficante's closest ally, Carlos Marcello. Just 2 days later, Oswald is also dead. Killed by Jack Ruby, the man who ran nightclubs for Trafficante's friend. Robert Blakey now believes that there are too many coincidences to be dismissed.
I believe the mob was not involved. I was wrong about that. They did have the motive, opportunity, and means. But killing him, they discussed that.
And somehow Trafficante fits right at the center. In September 1978, Blakey calls Santo Trafficante to the stand. But will he crack? September 1978. Robert Blakey, chief counsel to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, has summoned Florida mob boss Santo Trafficante to testify. Under investigation are his anti-Castro dealings with the CIA and connections to Jack Ruby, linking him directly to the killing of President Kennedy.
Mr. Trafficante, I want to ask you a question that is very important to this committee, and that is, did you have any foreknowledge of the assassination of President Kennedy?
Absolutely not. No way.
Blakey decides to go for broke. He reminds Trafficante of the explosive admission that led to Roselli's death.
Mr. Trafficante, before he died, Roselli hinted to associates that he knew who had arranged President Kennedy's murder. It was the same conspirators, he suggested, whom he had recruited earlier to kill Cuban Premier Fidel Castro. Mr. Trafficante, do you have any knowledge of that?
No knowledge whatsoever.
The committee now discover firsthand just how shrewd a mobster Trafficante can be.
Mr. Trafficante, did you ever know a Jack Ruby?
No, sir. I never remember meeting Jack Ruby.
Never remember meeting him?
No.
The House Select Committee keep hitting a brick wall. The Silent Don isn't giving anything away.
He always took the same stance. He never knew anything. He didn't remember anybody.
His answers remain consistent.
Absolutely not. No way. No. No knowledge whatsoever.
After 30 months of investigation, 12 volumes of hearings and appendices, the House Select Committee on Assassinations draws to a close. The report is published in 1979 and concludes that while the Mafia was not involved, it did not preclude the involvement of certain individuals, Carlos Marcello of New Orleans and Santo Trafficante of Florida.
There was a likely conspiracy, and we pointed to the most likely suspects as Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante, but we said we could not indicate with confidence that they did it.
The only irrefutable conclusion is that Lee Harvey Oswald killed the president and Jack Ruby killed Oswald. Despite Blakey's best efforts, Trafficante walks free. In the following years, Trafficante resumes his activities as the Florida mob boss, and despite Blakey's best efforts, continues to evade the law. Even Blakey's famous RICO law, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which dismantled the 5 crime families of New York, fails to nail Trafficante.
There's no question about how crafty and how successful Santo Trafficante was. He was the only major godfather that Joe Pistone, the special FBI agent, could not get. Santo Trafficante was the only mob boss to escape a big RICO indictment.
But the FBI did not stop looking into the 2 main mafia suspects linked to Kennedy's death. In 1983, fellow suspected conspirator, mob boss Carlos Marcello, is in prison on racketeering and bribery charges. The FBI place an informant in his cell. They talk about the Kennedy assassination, and Marcello opens up.
Marcello said to the informant, I killed him and I would kill him again.
But before the courts can question Trafficante, his health deteriorates, and in 1987, he dies, age 72. In the years after Trafficante's death, more evidence comes to light. Frank Ragano, long-term lawyer to Trafficante, claims that just 4 days before he died, Trafficante had opened up to him. Trafficante refers to the dead President John F. Kennedy by his mob nickname, Giovanni.
We should never have killed Giovanni. We should have killed Bobby.
He was confessing to the assassination of the President of the United States. My father was just in shock.
A lot of people think if there's a smoking gun, that's it.
But the confessions from Marcello and Trafficante himself come too late for Blakey.
If I had all that evidence in November of '63, I'd have a grand jury and I'd have an indictment. Whether I'd have conviction or not, it's a different story.
It is unlikely that we will ever know whether Santo Trafficante and Carlos Marcello were the men who hired Oswald and Ruby. But Santo Trafficante was unique. Throughout his life, the quiet Don kept out of the limelight and never spent a single night in an American jail.
Santo Trafficante was the big mafia fish that got away.
And there will always remain the suspicion that Santo Trafficante was the mob boss who pulled off the Mafia's greatest hit.